I'm Josh Watson, and I try to write songs. I try to be a dad. I try to be, the best partner I can be to a woman who, you know, lets me lets me come home at night. You know, I guess my artistic identity would be as a songwriter for whatever reason that is. You and as a rock and roll musician in a time where that is a very rare thing, I guess, or not, or people saying that they are, or I don't know what they want to call it. But so yeah, I'm a transplanted South Carolinian living in North Carolina, an expatriated South Carolinian. I wanted to write songs early on, and attempted from a very early age to write bad songs. Of course, having a thimble's worth of what kind of life experience do you even have at 15 years old? And with the songs I wrote at 15 were as bad as anything else I've written that's bad. um, and so, but around that time, around when I was in sixth grade, a friend of mine's brother, whom I knew her brother, because it's a town of, maybe 10,000 people, maybe, I don't know, but he had Bob Dylan's greatest hits, and I think I was like, hey, let me get him to let me borrow that CD. And she did somehow. She smuggled it out, or I don't know how it happened. But when you're a 13-year-old kid, in this isolated southern town, in the Bible Belt, smack dab in the Bible Belt, about an hour from Myrtle Beach, any sort of sense of the outside world or a bigger world or a bigger purpose or whatever is, you've got to find that wherever you can. So when I was 16 and my teacher said, you have a chance to get the hell out, I tried my best. And of hundreds of applicants, there were only 12 of us. And so I was in I was in the second class of the governor's school, where I moved from Marion, South Carolina at about 15 or 16, I would say, and went to the governor's school, where we learned. When I was a junior, we would have our regular classes, history and pre-calculus and physics or chemistry or whatever the heck it might be in the morning. And then in the afternoon, we would have fiction writing, nonfiction writing, poetry, playwriting. And at that point, there had been a huge endowment for it. So at that point, we didn't pay much money. I mean, less than $1,000, probably not that much. So I go with this kid who had been raised Southern Baptist, and really questioning a lot of that stuff. But, as far as what does all that mean? And so I went to the governor's school and I met this man, who was probably about I reckon now he was about 41 or 42 years old. But I had met him in Charleston when I auditioned, and I met him in Columbia again when I'd auditioned, and his name was George Singleton. But over the last 20 years, he's been a really good friend and real supportive of everything I've ever done, and helped me out when he could, with whatever he could. And I finished there, went to USC, got into Preston Residential College, which allowed me to not only sort of, develop a close-knit bunch of people. You're there with 200 people in a dorm where you eat with each other 4 nights a week, and that 4 nights a week, and there were professors who would come eat with you. And I've always been one to think, people our age don't really know very much. And so when I was able to talk to, these people who were 60, 70 years old and had seen things, that was really, and some of those people, since I was adopted, I've been sort of lucky enough to sort of choose my own family, or adopt people. And there's some of those people that are still, even now. So when I was at USC, I got into the graduate workshop as a junior. And so, and by the time I was a senior, I had Kwame Dawes' workshop as an undergraduate, as a graduate. And this guy put us through the absolute poetry boot camp ringer. I mean, it was something like you had to write 60 haiku and give him the best 30. You'd have to write 4 ringa sequences of haiku that were at least 30 or 40 verses long. You had to write book reviews. You had to write like 20 or 30 form poems. You had to write 20 or 30 free verse poems. And then you had to finish it with a Royal Crown sonnet sequence. So I had sort of, by that point, I got a book, and had a book published from that. And so then I said, well, let me get an MFA. So I came to UNC Greensboro, got an MFA in poetry. And by the end of that, I had been around, enough like AWP, and it sort of seen, the sort of the economic part of it, the sort of the cliquishness of it, and I'd known a lot of people who were famous, but they thought they were like Keith Richards or something famous, or at least in their brains they were like, oh, I have poems published in the blah da 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 da. And the more I sort of dealt with that, the more I went, okay, let me I don't know. My best friend Rylan and I tried to write songs, and we wrote a couple of them that were pretty good, since we had not written songs before. And then we wrote a good one, and then that's when you're screwed, because then you start going, well, maybe, huh? And so when I was about 23, at the sort of end or in the mid region of getting an MFA, I began writing songs. And so got an MFA and was basically like, I'm not probably going to ever write a poem again. Pretty much immediately. So right when I got done and right as I started teaching critical writing and literature, I started playing music too. And so, I was sort of torn because, by the time I got to being a professor, I was 24 years old, and that's not very much older than the little Johnnies and Sallys in the seats. So, getting, to be honest, any kind of real, like, you better listen to me about semicolons or whatever, whatever, but so I sort of, began to feel like that was a ball and chain, unfortunately. I mean, I'm sure some people find it fulfilling, but at the end of the day, I always had felt like, unfortunately, and people probably wish it were different, but I think I worked for the muse, in the way that Neil Young or some, might say. And so if when I was an adjunct professor, I realized that as I began to play more gigs, that I could do that and make, have the same benefits you know, um, get paid for just showing up, get tipped, get fed, get alcohol. I mean, there's some more benefits that you just don't get. No one says at the end of your English lecture, that thing you said about Philip Larkin, here's a $10 bill. Can you say that again? Nobody says that, and so um, I think I've got to the point where it's like, well, I can be broke and miserable or just broke. So sort of always been interested in the ethnomusicology and the history of things and how that informs what I'm doing and what's going on and where music's going and where culture's going. And so, I have been really under the spell for the last 8 years of people from New Orleans, a lot of New Orleans music, and in turn, for a long time, my inspiration, I guess it must be coming from like the South Carolina swamps. A lot of it um, has been, people like Alan Toussaint, Dr. John, um, but recently, people like Taj Mahal and Ry Cooder, who know a lot about the history of the music and what informs the music, and can play like 19 instruments each, that's sort of in the time of COVID, what I've been inspired to do more of, which is to learn more, play more piano, incorporate that into the live set, and mandolin, and more slides, So I do think those are two big folks. Pops and Mavis Staples and the Staples Singers have been, definitely, trying to write songs that deal with some of the things going on now. That's really, Pops definitely is a real, what do you say? I guess he's a real great example of how to write those kind of songs, um, or songs that engage with sort of what we see. Um, Also, though, people like J.J. Cale has had a tremendous influence on me, just from his ability, like Taj Mahal and like Ry Cooder, to fuse blues and country and jazz and all these different influences. Um, I like that, appeals to me as well. And being simple, not being, let's, no disrespect to like Steely Dan, but trying not to write songs like that. I mean, and there's nothing wrong with that, but um, I guess really coming from a blues perspective. Well, a friend of mine in Columbia, South Carolina, when I was there as an undergrad, said, well, when you're in Greensboro, that'll probably be the place you'll get your first job, and you'll hang out there and you probably settle down there. And at that point, I had not spent 4 years since I had left my hometown at 16. I spent 2 years in Greenville and 4 years in Columbia, and really thought, I may spend 2 years in Greensboro and then see y'all later on, folks. And I guess the ability to have that first gig and at least get my toe in the water and see if I liked it at all and whatnot was like appetizing. And again, writing songs, having friends, to some degree. Though when I moved to Greensboro, I did feel extremely isolated because I was coming from a state capital, which is pretty big, spread out, and you could go, and there's, it's just the difference between coming from a to a little bit smaller of a town, and that adjustment. There was some growing into Greensboro to do, and in 2012, I met Susan, who is my partner, who moved back after she got an MFA in fiction. She moved back from Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and then we had a son, and so that sort of did. But at that point, I was already beginning to play, pretty heavily, starting about 2008, and about by 2012. I was playing a lot. And again, by last year, I had worked it up pretty much. I had two booking agents help me here and there, but for the most part, it was me. And I had worked it up to 120 gigs a year, so the fact is, my Susan's parents are here, and they're 80 in their 80s, and so she wanted to be close to them, and she has family here. But also, you realize that Greensboro is 3 hours from a lot of places. So if I wanted to go and play in South Carolina, that's feasible. If I wanted to go play in Tennessee and Virginia, that's feasible. If I wanted to go play in Asheville, that's feasible. And so I began to realize the advantages of living in Greensboro as far as routing tours. Inspired a lot by the staple singers and Muscle Shoals and things like that. And so sort of blues songs with very minimal changes. And then it's interesting because I began writing persona songs because I felt like, who wants to hear about, I graded some papers this morning, graded some papers this morning. Nobody wants to hear that. So you write persona and loving the Grateful Dead and the band and stuff like that. That was no problem. Of like stepping out and trying to write about this or from this perspective or whatever, So, but the last, little while, it's been more like, I would not say necessarily nonfiction songs, but songs sort of bordering where it might have been 80% imagination and little kernels of who my biography or whatever. It sort of has consciously tipped a little bit to me, writing about my history or what I see politically, just sort of trying to write, I guess, more songs that are sort of, you write a set list, and again, with a bunch of different songs, you sort of get an idea when you write new songs, what kind of songs the band needs overall to sort of make the picture more complete or more diverse, more rounded off, songs that hopefully get people up shaking their butt a little bit, or slow songs or whatever, those kind of decisions that you make because you're trying to figure out that bigger picture. My family, I think, loves it because I was on the road a lot. And I mean, not on the road. I was basically a weekend warrior, whereas I would play gigs in town during the week if they arose. But most of the time, on the weekends when Thursday or Friday hit, I'd be gone until Sunday sometimes. And this has sort of made me, definitely be at home. It's made me be a homebody, and my family likes that, and it has given me an opportunity, to expand my musical palette in a way that when you're on the road and it's, you conserve your energy. It's not like I'm going to practice this new instrument that I'm going to bone up for because I need to do, you lie in a bed and you wait until an hour before you have to be where you have to be. And then you start getting motivated to get there. And, it's like, um, it ain't romantic. It ain't romantic. It's like I said, I've been to Savannah several times, but I've never seen Savannah. It really looks nice when you drive into it. But I load in, I eat my food, I sound check, I play the gig, I get my crap back in there. We all do, and then we go back into the next place. So it's not that sense of like, oh, I'm a tourist, this is great. It is really about, because you have to do it for 3 hours or 4 hours or whatever. And luckily I've only really lost my voice in 12 years about twice, but you really start, it's like, that's that when you have no control of your pitch at all. Not that I do anyway, but if I'm sick, it's really bad. It's sounds like some sort of dying animal, but this has given me the opportunity to bone up on piano, to learn piano, to think about piano, to add piano, to write on piano, and to thanks to you with the mandolin showing me some things, and having that to take with me and play around the house and some different things with that, it's given me an opportunity to hopefully, I mean, if every musician or artist or whatever isn't better at what they do by the end of this, they're doing it wrong, because there's no excuse at all, 6 months into this. That is one thing. I mean, again, it has thankfully for things like ArtsGreensboro, who for a good while was kind enough to send money to help supplement our income, all of our incomes, for a good while. We were all very fortunate. You're on everything. You're your own PR person. You have to come up with ideas for designs and logos and new logos, and it's been a while for this, and merchandise and booking, and and figuring all that, get contracts and things like that, and there's just so many aspects and so many plates being spun that it's before you even play a damn note, so that, and you have to worry about that part of it too. So that sort of, the social media aspect of it, I struggle with sort of figuring out how to really key into that, I think, in a way without hiring somebody, and that's a whole different beast. So I think that's it. But and I think right now, I've had the good fortune of being able to sniff out video series, web series that will allow the band to play, to present the music, to let people know that it's still something that is still active and will continue to be active. It ain't going anywhere. The real struggle for me is someone who had sort of worked up a semi-competent ability to book myself and my band, myself as a solo artist, myself with a drummer as a duo of any kind. I found myself, now not really knowing if I even need to bother, you know, because I don't know how far out people are booked. And some of the places we would tour down in Charleston a lot, and now some of those places are still open, but also, you know, a place that could pay us $400 or $500 no longer can afford to do that. So, we'll see. We're going to throw the spaghetti at the wall and see what sticks and what slides down. I don't know. The conversations that speak to you or resonate with you, um, to pull things from it, to pull ideas or images or illusions or whatever, and then bring it forth into now, I guess, or to see how it informs now. I guess if that's what I would say I'm trying to do, is I'm trying to carry on a conversation uh, with my bandmates, obviously, no brainer, as you can see in a physical sense, but also, Taj Mahal, the songs he writes, the songs I write, I hope are in some ways, a musical conversation or a musical, maybe not addition. I don't know, addition is not the right word, but I think, you know, I just think that to me is what it has been, is continuing a conversation that has in seeking what the masters sought, you know, um, whatever that might mean to you, whether it's Van Gogh or Rembrandt or whoever the hell it might be. Um, but that is, and I think that's why New Orleans has always resonated with me, is because you can go to Congo Square and you can stand there and you can say the fact of, without, this is where the pulse of rock and roll began. I don't care what people in Memphis want to tell you. You know what I'm talking about? Because it was outlawed anywhere but Congo Square, drumming, right in the South, drumming. So Sundays after church, they would meet there and play. And so there you can go and stand where my drummer and where I and where everybody in my band, why we do what we do every night, you can stand there. And across the street, you can go where a whole lot of shaking and tutti frutti, Mardi Gras, New Orleans, the Fat Man, the first rock and roll record, 1948, when Elvis, wasn't even growing, didn't even have hair anywhere other than his head. The real rock and roll, made by black folks, and you can go there. And that's why that city, I think, resonates with me, is because that is still the conversation uh, that I'm having or trying to have. Ending to serve the thing, to serve the piece of art, even if you love this line. And I study as a poet, And so even if you're married and love this thing of this line or this paragraph or this image or this, if it doesn't work, put it in the junkyard of ideas and come back to it some other time. It can be useful. Everything can be useful in that sense.